SEP Fanfic Readings presents Finding Hermione by ebookdragon. Chapter 30, Tiaras and Babies, January 7th to January 10th. Their lives started to return to normal. Draco and Hermione were both relieved when they woke up that morning after Minerva's adoption to the knowledge that Minerva hadn't woken them up screaming. They decided to keep her home from school a few more days just to make sure. Other than startling easier than she used to, Minerva was adjusting to the changes in her life. Minerva and Rose came home from the manor that first evening in high spirits. Just as he predicted, Rose was wearing a small diamond tiara that had belonged to some pompous Malfoy wife that fancied herself royalty. Minerva came home from her visit to the manor with a new necklace, a platinum chain with a pendant bearing the Malfoy crest. His mother informed them that the necklaces had belonged to a long-ago Malfoy daughter, along with a whole cachet of jewelry. That Malfoy daughter had been treated like royalty because of her rarity, no doubt spoiled rotten as well. The casket of jewelry was placed in Minerva's room. On her third night as a Malfoy, Draco found her in her pajamas preening in front of the full-length mirror with a rather large and gaudy emerald and diamond tiara perched on her head. The hair-replenishing potion was working wonders on her shorn head. She already was sporting its chic pixie cut. The hairstyle, coupled with her now white blonde hair and ice-gray eyes, made her look a bit like a fairy. Rose was fascinated by her sister's new look. She liked playing with Minerva's hair and took extra time to look at her eyes. Thankfully, she hadn't insisted that they turn her blonde hair too. Rose was adorable with her red curly hair and blue eyes, and Draco knew that Hermione would miss seeing her daughters the way they'd been born. So Rose hadn't asked to change her looks, and they didn't have to have an argument with a 6-year-old about her hair color. "Are you ready to go back to school, oh daughter of mine?" Draco asked playfully, taking the larger tiara off and replacing it with a smaller one. "There, much better," he teased, placing his hands on her shoulders and meeting their gaze in the mirror. "Yeah, I'm ready to go back. I'm not completely over it, but I think I will be," Minerva answered. "Do you think the adoption is helping you?" he asked. He'd asked the question many times over the last few days, wanting to know that Minerva didn't regret him adopting her. Now that she had gotten her way and wasn't a Weasley anymore, she'd opened up more to them. About her frustration at not being taken seriously, her guilt that she felt she had to attack her father, and guilt that she might have driven him to attack Hermione and Draco in the first place, her anxiety that Draco would die and Scorpius would lose his father. She nodded. "I can't explain it. I just feel better." "That's good. I want you to go to the headmistress or Professor Caro if you start having a hard time. Don't hold it in," he said sincerely. Hermione walked into the room, coming to tuck Minerva in. "Really, Draco? A tiara to bed is a bit much, don't you think?" Hermione teased. Draco winked at Minerva in the mirror before he turned to face Hermione. "I don't know. I think we should send her back to school in the tiara. This way everyone will know she's the Malfoy princess." Minerva giggled. Hermione rolled her eyes, took the tiara off her daughter's head, and put it away. "We aren't introducing our daughter to the wizarding world as the new Malfoy princess." She slid the rings off her daughter's fingers and put them away, then took off several bracelets, chiding gently. "Honestly, darling, less is more." Draco chuckled at Hermione's tone. Minerva had been wearing hundreds of thousands of galleons worth of jewelry when he'd come into her room. Rings had adorned each finger. Bracelets were stacked one on top of the next on each arm. A large emerald and diamond necklace matching the large tiara was around her neck over the Malfoy necklace. Draco felt a rush of joy at being able to claim Minerva as his child. "We were just talking about going back to school," Draco said, pulling the covers back for Minerva to climb in bed. "Are you ready to go back?" Hermione asked Minerva, brushing her short hair down. "You've missed a week, and I don't want you to fall behind on your studies, but I don't want to send you back if you're not ready." It had hurt Hermione when Minerva admitted her frustration and angry at her mother for not listening to her when she said she didn't want to go to Weasley's house. After Minerva had gone to bed after that revelation, Hermione had spent a long time staring at the fire in the grate before finally saying she had to stop treating Minerva like she was still a little girl. Minerva climbed into bed, and Draco tucked the blankets around her. "I'm ready. I feel better every day." Hermione looked speculatively at her daughter. "You're sure?" Minerva nodded, and Hermione bent down to kiss her brow. "I'm so proud of you. I know what you had to do was hard, and I never wanted you to have to do anything like that. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you before. Do you still feel guilty about it?" "No," Minerva answered with a yawn. Good. There's nothing for you to feel guilty about, Hermione said. Angel, Draco said. I meant what I said. Don't bottle it up. Professors McGonagall and Caro have both said that they would be there to listen if you need to talk. They both kissed Minerva good night. Draco stuck his head in to check on her before he retired for the night and found her curled up with a smile on her face. It's working, Draco said smugly. He lay back on the pillows with his fingers laced behind his head. Hermione straddled his waist and rubbed her core against him. You needn't look so arrogant about it. Draco groaned at the feel of her rubbing against him. They hadn't been able to make love since he came home from the hospital, and he missed her. Thank you, he said with a sigh. For what? She asked, nibbling at his jaw. Letting me adopt her. Not throwing a fit because Mother gave her a casket of jewelry, he answered, running his hands through her curls. She purred as he dug in and started massaging her scalp. I've learned to pick my battles when it comes to Malfoy extravagance, though they are not going to school with the Tiaras. Fine, we'll limit the Tiaras to special occasions, like shopping trips and Quidditch games, Draco said in mock resignation. There was honestly nothing he thought young girls needed tiaras for, but he wasn't going to stop them from playing dress-up with them, and it was fun to watch Hermione get exasperated with the things. The things were only sitting around and not doing anything. No one was probably ever going to wear them. His mother wasn't that ostentatious, nor were they considered fashionable. Hermione smacked him playfully, as she continued to kiss her way down his neck. The soft slide of her lips against his skin, coupled with the sharp nips of her teeth, had him shivering in anticipation. He froze then at the thought of his seed filling her. His seed had already done its job. She was pregnant, with his children. Twins. Hermione, should we be, Yes, she answered simply, trying to get him to take his shirt off. Do you want to stop what we're doing? She asked, grinding down on him this time. God, no, he growled. I just don't want to hurt the babies, he panted, giving in and letting her roll her hips against him. As magnificent as you are, there's no way that you can hurt the babies, she said with a breathy sigh as she continued to rub herself against him. He rolled onto his back and brought her with him so that he could snuggle up with her. That was amazing, he panted. Was all of that true? Yes, she said sleepily, trailing a finger down his chest. There's more, but I was a little too distracted to get it all out. Makes you wonder why people don't have more babies, Draco said idly, wrapping a curl around his finger. Hermione snorted. I could think of several reasons why. I'm sure you remember the crying and waking up every 2 hours for feedings, the smelly diapers. It's exhausting. With Minerva, there were days that I felt I didn't sleep a wink. Draco skimmed his hand down her back. Weasley didn't help you. Hermione let loose a sharp bark of laughter. Yeah, right. He pretty much made himself scarce if Minerva started crying. He was fine when she was happy, gurgling baby. He would sit and coo over her for hours. But God forbid the man change nappies or get spit up on him. He wanted lots of kids, a big family just like his was growing up. As an only child, I wanted that too. But then I saw how much he wasn't willing to help me. So I told him I didn't want any more. Rose was a surprise, but Minerva was 5 then, so it was easier. You know that's not going to happen to us, right? Draco reassured her. You'll make sure it doesn't if you don't want your balls hexed off, Hermione answered with a laugh. I've seen how you are with Scorpius. That doesn't come from being a standoffish father. What was it like for you after he was born? Draco stared up at the ceiling, thinking back to Scorpius's first year. Wonderful, he started, and awful. Being a single father to a newborn has a whole series of complications that can never be prepared for. Mother came to stay for the first 4 or 5 months until he was sleeping through the night. She and Tansy would help me. I didn't know what to do. I'd never been around babies, but I made them show me. He and we figured it out. He cried a lot at first. I think he could sense my grief and was grieving himself. Draco ran a hand through his hair. There were parts of Scorpius's early days that he hated thinking about. Things that scared him to this day, and how the timely intervention of an angel had saved him from genuinely panicking about the welfare of his son. He hated formula. We were scared when he wouldn't take a bottle. We looked for wet nurses, but everyone just saw him as the son of a Death Eater. Draco clenched a fist at the thought of the needless cruelty those women had inflicted on his family. Draco took a deep, shuddering breath and fingered a curl of Hermione's hair. Her hands traveled soothingly down his chest. Mother took him with her on an errand one day so that I could take a nap. I'd been up all night with him, walking the floor and trying to coax him to take a bottle. When they came back, he had a full belly and a week's supply of milk. Mother said she made an arrangement with a lady that had enough milk to supply an army of babies. She refused to tell me who. She only told me that she was a perfectly nice lady and that I should be honored that she would help. I was, and I was grateful that someone would help us, and I didn't press Mother about who it was because I didn't want the lady to stop. He was so small, Hermione sighed, breaking him from his reverie. Then she stiffened beside him. I'm sorry. She stuttered and trailed off. He was 8 weeks early, Draco answered, then stopped, her words clicking in his head. How did you know how small he was? Hermione shifted beside him. She looked up into his eyes with a wary, pleading look. I'm sorry. I know I should have asked you for permission. He was just so hungry, and your mother was so desperate, Hermione said, trailing away with a pleading look in her eyes. I'm sorry, I should have asked you first, she whispered. Draco sat up, bringing her up with him, and searched his eyes. You? It was you? Hermione nodded. There's nothing to be sorry for. I probably would have gotten down on my knees and kissed your feet for what you did. I would have set the house off to help you so that you weren't so exhausted. I would have given you anything you wanted. He'd wanted to know for years about the woman that had helped Scorpius. His mother always refused to tell him, saying she was respecting the lady's privacy. Tell me everything. Tell me how it happened, he demanded, eager for answers. Hermione laced her fingers through his. Well, you know your mother and I became friends about a year after the war was over. She came over to my house for tea and brought Scorpius. Minerva was asleep and Ron was at Quidditch practice. She left him in his carrier and went to the restroom. He started crying. His cry, it was this thin, plaintive wail, and I felt so sorry for him, not having a mother. So I picked him up. He could smell the milk on me, and he started rooting around and grunting. Draco let his gaze drift down from her pleading eyes, pleading for him to understand, begging for him not to be mad for not asking his permission to feed his son. Anger wasn't the emotion he was feeling now. She took a deep breath as she plunged on with her explanation. I asked your mother if I could feed him, and she practically burst into tears. So I fed him, and while I did, she told me that he didn't like the formula, and would only take it when he was starving. She told me that you weren't having any success at finding a wet nurse. He was so small, but he was strong. He didn't have any trouble latching on. We talked about him taking my extra milk. She tried to pay me, but I wouldn't have it. I didn't need the money, and I wanted to give him a little mothering like I imagined his mother would. I felt bad for him and for her. She pushed his chin up to meet her gaze, and he could see the sorrow there. And you. He kept his gaze on her as she continued. She started bringing him every other week when Ron was away to pick up more milk. He didn't really like my friendship with your mother, and he would have been livid to find out that I was nursing your son. Draco felt himself get angry at the mention of that git, and that Hermione felt she had to hide what she was doing. She ran her hands along his jaw, making him relax the clenched muscles. Her eyes took on a faraway look as she continued. He got so big and he was so adorable. He looked so much like you. He would smile so big whenever your mom brought him over that his little fist would wave in the air while he kicked his feet. I would play with him, tickle his little belly, sing him songs. She sighed, and a tear slipped down her cheek. Draco reached forward and caught the tear on the end of his finger. My milk started drying up when they were about 6 months old, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to feed them anymore. It broke my heart that I was going to have to stop, but I knew that I would have to eventually. I asked your mother not to tell you. I didn't want you to feel like you owed me for anything. I wanted to help, and it was enough for me to know that Scorpius was happy and healthy. She shivered, and Draco drew the sheet up around her and ran his hands up and down her arms to warm her up. Your mother and I agreed that since I didn't want you to know, it would be best if I didn't keep seeing Scorpius after he stopped taking my milk. She said she was pushing it enough by not telling you who was feeding Scorpius. She didn't feel right about sneaking him away. I have a picture of us. Your mom took it one day without me knowing, and gave it to me the last time I fed him. Draco sat staring at her. Emotions flooded through him too quickly for him to latch on to just one. Wonder at her that she would take the child of her childhood enemy to her breast. Gratitude. Profound, overwhelming love for this woman that had been a part of his life for so long without him even knowing. He wondered how she'd managed to keep the secret this long, and how many other secrets she and his mother had. "Draco, say something," Hermione said nervously. Draco startled and said the first thing that popped into his head. "Can I see the picture?" he asked, suddenly very curious to see his son being nursed by his love. Sure," she said. She reached over and opened the drawer of the nightstand and pulled out a slim black leather journal. She thumbed through it until she found the page she was looking for, and handed the journal to him. Affixed to the page was a picture, and below that was a curl of white blonde hair wrapped with a pale blue bow. Draco stared, mesmerized by the photo. Hermione was sitting in a rocking chair in front of a window. She was smiling down at his son and saying something to him while she stroked his head. His son's head and blanket was thrown over one shoulder, covering her so that she wasn't exposed to the camera. "Can I have a copy?" Draco asked in a choked whisper. Hermione grabbed a wand and silently cast a spell to copy the photograph. Draco took it from her and set it in the corner of a photograph of Scorpius and him on a broom together when Scorpius was 5. He lay down on his side and drew Hermione down to him. He hid his face in her hair, breathing in her scent, as he tried to control the surge of emotions coursing through him. "Are you okay?" she asked into the darkness. He snuggled closer to her and wrapped an arm around her waist. "You have no idea how much it means that you would do that for us. For him." "It wasn't any great sacrifice, Draco. I was happy to do it. I had more than enough for Minerva, and I wasn't going to let a baby starve, no matter the parents' former allegiances or past grievances," Hermione said, twining her fingers with his and drawing his arm up to rest between her breasts. He cradled her back into his chest, as if bringing her closer would impart how much it meant to him. "It meant a lot to us. To me," he started, impassioned. "You wouldn't believe how many people there were willing to let him starve because he was the son of a Death Eater. It was awful begging for their help, offering exorbitant amounts of money and having them sneer at me. I was willing to do it, sacrifice my pride to them for the sake of my son. Some were kinder than others, saying their family wouldn't like it. But no one that Mungo sent to us wanted to help. I would have paid any amount of money, would have given them anything they wanted. That you did it without asking anything in return, no money, no acknowledgement. You can never understand how much it means to me that you did that. I could never hope to repay you for that." "There's nothing to repay. I was happy to do it. It saddened me to have to let Scorpius go, so I'm glad I get to have him back," she said with a sleepy yawn. Draco felt her breathing even out, and her body relax against him as she sunk into sleep. He lay awake holding her, staring off into the dark of the room for a long time afterward. Thoughts of things that might have been swirling around in his head. What if? What if she'd let his mother tell him who was feeding his son? What would have happened if he'd gotten to bring his son to her rather than his mother acting as an intermediary? Would she have stopped taking Scorpius to her breast and simply given him the bottles? Would she have left Weasley sooner if they'd been around each other more, especially then, when they had his son to connect them?